Cummings, Stephanie Zaremba, Sumya Ganapathy, Patrick Fortin, and we are waiting on Paul Manganero, who is traveling right now, so may not be able to come. We also have Enzo Racionato from the FinCom and Mina Makarios from legal counsel from Anderson and Krieger. So the agenda for today was really kind of just two things, if possible, which was to agree on how to deal with the findings section and then recap the vote on the priorities. As of right now, I only have 3 members' priorities lists ranked, so we might not be able to get through that today, and we can get through that at our next meeting. So the goal today was to determine how we're going to determine how we're going to deal with the findings. So staff reviewed findings and found that there were a lot of findings mixed with some opinion, and we gave comments. Those comments are not expected to be in the final version of the final report. That was just comments that we had given. This is the task force's report, and you can choose to do it any way you'd like. And that was meaning choose to present the findings and recommendations any way you'd like. We simply gave comment, so we can kind of get to the bottom of that and how we're gonna deal with that. I gave everyone kind of a couple different options of how we can deal with that. The version of the findings that I'm going to put in front of everybody this morning is with no comments at all. It's a totally clean version of everybody's work put into one document, and the only thing that's from staff is on it is simply a summary of the parking permits sold at that beginning portion. So it's just someone was asking for that, for what those numbers were. Outside of that, that is the only thing that is, Patty, it looks like you've disabled participant screen sharing. If you could allow me to share my screen. But yeah, the only thing that, the version that we're looking at, the only thing that staff touched was simply showing the number of permits that we sold, and everything else is just as is. So we have a couple, let me get this up. So
all set.
Great, thanks. So you can see that we've color coded everyone's responses. The only thing in red that you're going to see in this entire document is simply just this table showing what these numbers are, and everything else is just all conglomerated. Pat, you have a question?
Yeah, I'm just big picture before you get into this. I don't know if it'll save time or make things worse, but I mean, I'm not a political person, so I'm not involved in any of these things. I don't really do anything politically within the town. I didn't send any findings. I sent a list of recommendations and a review of what I thought was going on. I didn't classify anything findings. I didn't do anything. Why are we trying to me, what you're doing is a lot of work, and it just seems to make things more confusing. I got the sense, and maybe I'm just, I'm not involved enough in any of these processes, that we'd write reports and they'd go to the selectmen, and then the selectmen can do anything they want. I mean, we don't have any power. Why are we trying to chop, cut, paste, and do all sorts of stuff with these? And why not just send what we send you and just move on?
Yeah, so I actually, Brian and I talked about this a little bit. I guess maybe we could get the sense of the task force if that's something you're interested in, instead of trying to bring this all into one report, as Brian has done. If it's your preference to each send 5 individual reports to the select board, with the votes on the priorities that Brian suggested in some previous communication. I mean, there's a lot of work to try to bring this together as one document, and if folks, I think my concern was that, some of the findings obviously are, everybody has a different interpretation of materials that's been provided, and some of the findings have a personal, tilt to that, which is totally fine, and not saying you shouldn't do it that way, but to try to bring that into one document to merge it all together is a little challenging. So it's probably worth having that conversation if this task force would rather just submit 5 individual reports with findings, recommendations, however, you put it in an individual report to the select board.
I think I would be open with 5 individual reports.
I jump. Oh, sorry, Soumya.
No, Stephanie, go right ahead if assume you're done.
Are you done, Soumya? I didn't see.
Yes, I am. Sorry.
Okay. This is a complete waste of time. We all volunteered. We were not conscripted. The ask when we volunteered was very clear. Brian provided us a template for the report. The charge from the select board before any of us volunteered was rankings, findings, recommendations, and then additional commentary if we got those things done. There are reports that were submitted that don't have those, didn't use the template Brian provided and asked us to use. We're all town residents. We're all entitled to present our opinion to the select board or any others. Like your opinions are completely valid and fine to represent. That's not what this task force was asked to do. And it's very disrespectful to Beth and Brian and Patty and the folks who are working really hard on this to not do the bare minimum of what they're asking us to do. And frankly, I'm happy to go through and edit these. I want to come to some sort of consensus like we were asked to do and find actual findings of fact that are based in fact and then make recommendations that we can agree on. But if the other members of this task force aren't interested in doing that, we all have a lot of other things we can be doing, and I'm really sick of wasting town resources on this.
I mean, I almost don't want. Can I go, Brian? Sorry.
Please. This is open now. I think the work quote of what we've done is. I think we've done the work. It's a question of now how to deal with it. So this is totally open. We have 2 more meetings to figure this out. Go right ahead, Pat.
Oh, so 1 meeting after today.
Sorry,
right?
1 meeting after today. Right. Let's we'll be sure of that. Pat, go ahead.
Stephanie, that kind of bums me out because I have a lot to do, and I don't know where the waste of time is. I mean, to me, maybe I wasn't up to speed on this enough, but there's a lot to figure out here, and I don't think we're disrespecting anybody. I mean, I think there's a lot of good questions, and I've learned a lot, and I think that's part of the process. I don't know why you're so frustrated and bitter about the whole thing, and I feel like you're talking to me directly, or at least me partially. I mean, if you have a problem, let's talk about it and figure it out.
I do have a problem, and I have a problem with trying to make it out like I'm being divisive for calling out, and I'm not talking directly to you. I'm talking about the fact that I opened everyone's reports, and in a number of them, I saw no findings and no recommendations on those 6 items that we were asked. I don't understand why, when there was a report template given, we can't even use the template. And
but whose choice is the template? We're a task force. Brian did a suggested, and it was a suggested template.
Yeah,
it's not a template we're locked in to use.
Yes, we are serving at the select board's request. We volunteered. We're not an appointed or an elected committee. We have no authority.
Right.
We were asked to do something. Why did you volunteer? And I'm not saying you personally, I'm saying why would you volunteer if you don't want to do what's being asked of you?
The selectmen didn't ask us to fill out a template.
So just so we're clear, the template was in the charge. I didn't come up with the template. The template was in the charge. I just simply implemented this work, if that means anything. But it was in the charge. It was trying to help everyone organize everything. What Beth and I did simply in terms of the document, if you take out all the staff comments, the report stands by itself, meaning we've conglomerated everybody's words into one document. That in and of itself, color coded, is not a picking, cutting, pasting. I mean, yes, there was cutting and pasting involved, but all we did was put your words into one place and color coded it. So it does stand by itself in terms of everyone's color coded comments. Or if you would prefer, you can also do, everyone just can submit their reports individually. But the goal was to put everything together so that the select board can review everything at once. It wasn't meant to do anything other than that. It was just to put them all in the same place so that they could evaluate it. If we don't want to do that, it's perfectly fine. Perfectly fine. It is your report. So
right.
we're just trying to hear
the
to help.
point is to get the information that you've gathered and your opinions on that information in a report to the select board. And if the task force can't come together to agree on a set of findings, which my guess will be a challenging hurdle to get over, not in a bad way to anybody, but like we all interpret information in different ways and come about decisions from different perspectives. So I think, reading the reports, there's probably some points where we won't get all 5 members to agree that something is a finding. So we're just trying to help, so we don't spend the next 3 hours going through like 5 findings. We're just trying to help guide this task force to a point where you feel like each of your perspectives are being represented if you can't come to some sort of consensus on items.
Pat and then Sumya.
Well, I would, in the interest of time, I do have questions on the rankings because I do feel like we had options on rankings, whether it's 6 or the other proposed option. If we're locked into this mechanism, there was an option to discuss 3 rankings, which we haven't even discussed, which I think we should have a conversation about. But to move the content along, I would second Sumaya's proposal that we just submit the reports individually and don't get caught up in it and don't overthink it and don't get worried about it. And then everyone's opinion gets in. And then let's move and work on the rankings.
Sumya?
So how about if there's areas of agreement, and I think it's true that we all interpret the information differently, because I realized that my recommendations were a lot different from the other members of the task force. Would it be okay if we kind of have consensus and a combined report on areas of agreement, and then on the other areas we have separate reports? And I do want to thank Brian and Marty, because I did appreciate the guidelines you gave us. To me, this was a very challenging way to rank everything, and I really appreciated having the 6 areas. So I definitely do appreciate all the work that you guys did. It definitely made it easier for me.
So I wonder if, if we're going down the route of submitting 5 separate reports, then this task force could put together a cover letter of some sort that lays out your rankings and maybe some areas of general agreement that you feel like the board should dig deeper in certain areas. Or we can highlight the differences of opinions that some folks, the conclusion that was drawn was that there should be a new RFP issued. Some felt that the continuation of the negotiation on the LDA with these areas being highlighted for future discussion.
I think that's a good idea. If it is going to be 5 reports, some type of preamble of some kind. Pat, go ahead.
And Beth, I'm all for that. And Sumaya, I get where you're going. I'm just afraid we're going to spend 20 hours, going through. The letters are long, the reports are long. It's 5 documents. And I think in a cover letter, we could potentially do that if there's areas of primary focus for people. Beth, I'm completely cool with that plan. And the discussion I wanted to have related to rankings is one of the other options on that report was pick, are there 3 priorities? And I think our whole discussion is really focused on parking, revenue, and affordable housing. It seems, the other things are obviously important. It seems like those are dramatically the priority of the group of the town voters that voted no. And my thought was, before I get into rankings, was, do we want to make those the top 3? Because clearly this is going to be a challenge for the selectmen. Clearly they have a long road, and to at least, whether it's this RFP or a new RFP, it seems like, and I don't want to speak for anybody, but at least for me, those would definitely be my top 3. So I could easily put that in a cover letter, summarize maybe some of my core points, and attach it to my report, as Beth said, and be done with it.
So my thought was that the cover letter would be a joint cover letter from this from this group. And if we could come to a consensus among the members saying what your top 3 priorities are, we could convey that in the cover letter. And then obviously everybody's recommendations fall out into different categories as to how to achieve those top 3 priorities, right? So then the background information are your individual reports suggesting how to move forward for the board to consider.
Sumia?
Excuse me, guys. Can you hear me? It's Paul.
Oh, hey, Paul.
Oh, okay. Hey, the good news. I made it to Cincinnati. But I'm in a vehicle. Sorry to interrupt like that. I joined in about 5 minutes ago, and thank you for allowing me to join in late. And I'm in your vehicle, but appreciate it. I did hear the last part of the conversation, and it is a very complex situation, and there's a lot of opinions on it, and I don't think anything's wrong with the task force or any other organization or committee having differences of ideas and opinions and interpretations. So I think I heard correctly that one option was to submit the 5 individual reports, because those are people put a lot of work and time into this, and their thought process, the way they put it on paper is different than others. So I would back putting the 5 in and doing the rankings. And I just heard the cover letter come to consensus with the top 3 focal points I would like the select board to focus on in their renegotiation, whether it be with Civica or somebody else. But thank you again.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks for joining while you're traveling. Sumia?
So I just had 2 points. One is I feel like in this process, my ranking has changed a little bit. And I think one thing that I think is very important is also having town oversight, especially if we get into a longer term ground lease. So I do think affordable housing is extremely important, as well as parking, but I did have some change of opinion during this process. And I guess one question I had for you, Beth and Brian, is if we have this many, let's say we have 5 different reports with 5 different recommendations, how will that be interpreted by the select board, and can we help them guide their decision in the best interests of everyone?
Yeah, I think I'll go first, and if Beth wants to add, I think that makes sense. I mean, I think the idea was that we would be trying to make sense of all of the different points of view into one document and just giving it to the select board. We weren't gonna do much more than that in terms of how to give them direction. It's hard when you have 2 conflicting recommendations, or when we have 2 conflicting findings, which has happened. So, again, we were just trying to kind of make sense of conflicting findings and conflicting recommendations. I think that's the major role right now that we're trying to do here, is what do we do with conflicting findings? What do we do with conflicting recommendations? Right now, the answer is centering around not doing that and just putting all 5 out, which, that is the task force's choice. I mean, you bring up a good question. It is difficult for us to we cannot reconcile all of these recommendations, even no matter, and we cannot reconcile all of these findings. That's what staff showed. And that was kind of the major part of the exercise, is that we can't reconcile all these things. Beth, do you have anything to add? Or?
Yeah, so I think part of this is a conversation about how you want to present this to the board, right? So I think this is scheduled to be on their agenda for October 18th. So we should probably have a conversation in terms of how, obviously the board will get whatever report is prepared in their packet next Thursday, Friday. And then, we should discuss with the select board chair how she wants to, wants that meeting to go. If it's a verbal presentation by the task force, if it's just the select board having read the report and then asking the task force members questions. So to me, that's an opportunity to really explain, that based on the information that was provided, each member came to their own conclusions. And in a lot of cases, we weren't, as Brian said, able to reconcile all that information into one document, although you maybe agree on a few items as priorities for the board going forward. And I think, the rankings that Brian provided in that cover letter, we can we can, so each of those were weighted, so we can show what each individual ranked, and then we can weight that into one conglomerate ranking of the task force, right? So that the board can see that maybe some of you ranked town oversight higher than maybe somebody else did, but in the end, if you, when you add and weight all of the rankings for the entire task force, these are the things that come out as priorities. Maybe that's how we move forward.
Guys, this is Paul again. I'm sorry if I'm interrupting because I'm just on audio and I can't see and I don't know how to raise the hand here. But in case I get lost, I'm on a tricky part of the road. In case I lose you, Patty has a Word document with my thoughts on this. So if you lose me, please, Patty, present it. But I think this can be solved pretty easily. And I know everybody won't agree, but keep an open mind to this. My proposal was this: present to the select board that they should consider keeping the original RFP as is, with a little tweak to the emphasis on parking, because that's what the community is strongly telling us they want. At least 70% of them in the survey that the chamber did. Also, respect the vote of June 2021, where people considered concerned about the price. Add price to it, so everybody gets what they want. Open it up again to the original qualified bidders. And then we get the best deal wherever it falls. It might come back just as is. Civico might be the best bid as is, and then we can go on with it. At least the whole community feels like they got a fair shot. Everything was reviewed, price was included, and we are where we are, and no one can argue with that. My opinion. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Sumi, I'll get to you in just a sec. I think it's a lot easier to kind of put all the recommendations into kind of one place and see where they lie. Findings are generally supposed to be agreed upon. So that's why it seems like it's potential, the way this is going, is that it would be 5 different reports. But Sumi, please.
I guess I should make, I guess I appreciate that, Brian, and I'm fine with the 5, but I'd like to make that motion and get the members' thoughts on that, if we could move forward with that proposal. Nothing changes from the RFP except a little more emphasis on the parking. And I don't know if Patty can show it to you folks. And then we add the pricing, reopen it to the 8 original bidders, and get the best deal out there. It might be just what we have, but the market will dictate that. There's nothing more truer than an open, free market. So I would like to make a motion that we join together and approve that and move that forward as our recommendation. Thank you.
Paul, I'm only going to say that so right now we really are just talking about findings. We have a whole meeting at the moment talking about we haven't even talked about how we're going to deal with the findings yet, and you're making a motion for recommendations. So I hope you can understand that we haven't even gotten through how we're dealing with the findings section. So I hope you don't mind, but I'm just going to keep moving with the findings, just because we can't even agree on that.
No, I totally recommend what you're saying, but I'm thinking maybe my motion was for consideration. If no one wants to second it, then we don't have to bring it any further. I respect it either way, because like I said, we could probably, if other members have made a comment, we could probably sit here forever debating it. I just thought this was a way to be all inclusive and move forward in the best way, but I might be wrong too. So I just want to see if I can help out the process. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong in bringing the idea. I think everyone has many recommendations that they could bring at this time. So I just don't think, I guess it's super appropriate to be voting about a recommendation when everyone else could be talking about recommendations right now. Like we're just not there. And I don't believe we are going to be voting on recommendations. That is up to the task force. But right now, I would like to focus on how we're going to deal with these findings first.
I'll second the motion and just ask Paul, will you just defer debate until we get through the findings? But I'll second the motion so it's on the schedule. And
Pat, that's a great idea. So Pat seconds the motion. So is there a discussion, or can we table discussion to after we finish the findings?
Can I just excuse me, Paul? Can I just restate so we make sure that Patty can get this in the notes and we all understand your motion? So your recommendation is to reissue the RFP with an emphasis on increasing the number or replacing the number of parking spaces lost that are available to the town and adding revenue to the town as a ranking,
As an evaluation criteria.
as an evaluation criteria.
Correct. I think it was actually price as an evaluation criteria.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, go Paul.
Yeah. No, I'm going to let the developers and the free market dictate all that, what they can propose as their best deal. And if Patty can get that up, I'm proposing that we keep the original RFP. I'm not specifying any number of parking spots, but just to carry a little bit more weight. I think it was a 2X before in the original RFP. Put more weight on that, and then add additional criteria as pricing as the most weighted, and keep everything else the same. And then let the open market dictate the scenario. And like I said, we might come back and might find out, oh, that's the best deal we can have. Because I think, like to Pat's earlier comment, our top three things were pricing, parking, and affordable housing. That would be beautiful if we get all three.
So I just want to be clear when we talk about price, is that an upfront payment to the town, or is that revenue overall?
I should classify as price/revenue for all the dollars the town is going to bring over in during the life of this building. And I know we're not able to do a 99-year evaluation, but hopefully we can do at least a 30-year evaluation. So whether we get it up front over the course of time, I don't know how we'll get it. But then again, let the developers present their best case for let them compete for it.
All right. Okay. So that motion has been first and seconded. We're going to suspend debate about this motion and take it up when we talk about recommendations. Sumya.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up the point that the June vote was very close. I looked at the numbers yesterday, and there was only a difference of like less than 100 votes. So it could have gone the other way too. So I don't think the town spoke overwhelmingly that they, with the no vote, and if it was the other way, and if the yeses won, I don't think the town would have overwhelmingly spoke either way. So I just wanted to bring that point. And then I just had a question for Stephanie and Bill, if you guys were open to having 5 separate reports, or if you'd want to find more agreement.
So question to Stephanie.
I'd be open.
Bill. Yep.
I'd certainly be open to it.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay, Pat.
I just read Bill's. I mean, we just got Bill's email, and I think out of fairness to Bill, since he sent it yesterday, maybe Patty could put Bill's up too. Bill's is a little bit like Paul's, but a little different, but I think it has some really good points in it. Maybe we could merge the two of them together, honestly, but could Patty put, I mean, we all have it on our computers. I don't know if you can see it. I just brought it up on my phone to see what it is. And out of respect for Bill, I think we should all have a chance to look at that too.
Just give me a minute to do it.
Thank you.
And when Patty's doing that, I'd like to just respond to Somalia. The vote is the vote. In America, if you win by one vote, it's a win. And I'm not saying there was winners and losers here. I'm just saying, when I mentioned the word overwhelmingly, the people that came out to vote in June, it's never been seen before like that. So the passion was there. Unfortunately, the division was there also. So my major reasoning for joining this task force was trying to help mend the wounds and bring the community back together and come to a fair and reasonable compromise. But the vote is the vote. Doesn't matter if you win by 1 or 1,000 or 1 million. Thank you.
Stephanie.
Yeah, I mean, yes, the vote results stand, but I think the point is that the town, we cannot say that people in town feel overwhelmingly one way or the other, because they are nearly equally split, those who came to vote. But what I was going to say was, why can't the town try to get more on parking and revenue in its existing negotiations, given that going back to an RFP stage will have, first of all, some legal implications that this task force is not in a position to opine on one way or another, and that's something that town council needs to talk with the select board about. But legal issues aside, reissuing the RFP will also make the timing of this change and will have implications for our 40B safe harbor and our availability to satisfy the safe harbor requirements in some future years, a few years from now. So I don't understand. Help me understand why rebidding is the recommendation as opposed to let's try to get a better deal with respect to revenue and parking in with the bidder who won the bidding process, which, by the way, went through total due process and everyone in town had ample opportunity to watch and pay attention and weigh in for years. So why are we, that's my question. Can someone please explain to me why we can't continue through this existing process and why we have to make those timing decisions that have implications that I don't think are being considered?
I'll jump in on that. I respect those views, Stephanie. Number one, because the community doesn't feel like they got the best deal because pricing was never even a criteria in the original one. And to go back to just one developer has no negotiation advantage for the town at all. And so opening it up gives it the town the fairest and best advantage that they gained through the vote, because they said, hey, you got to go back and redo this to the town. So I don't know why we would want to steer down a road where we hand back the negotiation advantage to the one developer. And as far as safe harbor and stuff, this project's not scheduled to start for several years because of everything that's going on. So I think time we have on our side. I ask you this: what's the big rush? I'll turn it around and ask you this: what's the big rush, and what do we lose or gain by going back and redoing it?
So, but on that, Paul, I mean, yes, the project's not slated to start for a few years because there are a number of things that need to happen, and there, as was explained to us, there's the funding process that takes time, and I think the select board has worked really hard over the past few years with Brian, frankly, as our town planner, to like stagger and align development so that we're continuing to make progress and keeping that safe harbor. And just to be clear, what I'm asking is the town could go to Civico, ask for things, and still the negotiation can still fail, right? They still could then say that didn't work and they could go to the next highest bidder, or they could then choose to open it up to an RFP. That's what I'm failing to understand. It's not a free market, it's government procurement. And that's where I'm saying, I think this is ultimately a decision that town council and the select board have to make because there's legal implications. But my question is like, why wouldn't we go through a maybe 1 month process of seeing what Civico would do? And if we don't like what comes to the table, town meeting can reject it, select board can reject it. It's not like we can't go to an RFP after trying that.
Thanks for that, Stephanie. So we're going to do Pat, Sumya, and then just a reminder to people that we haven't made an official decision on what we're doing with the findings, and we're basically talking about merits of recommendations right now. So just so Pat, go ahead.
Stephanie, I can only speak for me, but I didn't come into this process with any, I didn't even understand the terms of the RFP or anything else. I didn't come with any predisposed agenda on anything, except that the town wanted this to be revisited. And I knew from people that, pushed me to be on this, that there were major parking issues that were coming out of it and a strong connectivity to revenue. When we got into the first meeting, I mean, we were given a charge, but clearly what was said at that first meeting is, as soon as you make any substantive changes to this, it's outside the RFP. So any negotiation with Civico will be very limited and you can't involve other developers. And none of us knew that. None of us had any understanding of that. Maybe we should have. But to me, a renegotiation is not with one person. I think Bill Cummings said it in the first meeting. You don't have any leverage with one person. It's ludicrous. And the more I got into this process and looked at it, there are substantive holes in this process that a rebid would fix. I mean, the revenue is a perfect example, and it's not my priority. I mean, it's probably my second priority, but revenue was not even an item on the RFP. That to me is, so how do you go back to Civico and say, tear this down? And there's a lot of revenue opportunities. We've spent a lot of time talking about the Waterfield building. Why is that involved? Expanding units, unit mixes, all sorts of things. I kind of, I don't want to sound like I'm in the same camp with Paul. We both have different opinions, but I think the free market has another opportunity with this, that it could be a much better deal. My understanding, and maybe I'm wrong, is that this is 3 years out anyway, because it can't start till MBTA is done. So I don't see time. To me, it's crazy to rush through this thing when it's been so volatile. And I think the vote was close. I agree with you on that, but there's clearly half the town that wants this to be looked at. To relook at it, I have no idea what will happen. And we don't have any power anyway. To recommend to the selectmen that they rebid to the RFP with a bunch of directors, if they can go to Civico, and that's their choice. If they can go to Civico and get money and more parking and change the Waterfield building and move all this stuff around, then God bless them, that's their choice. My understanding is that's not going to happen. So you're in a box that's very difficult with Civico. And I'm pretty strong about the way to really solve that and be sure is go out to the bidders and give all 8 of them a chance to recreate it.
Sumya, and then we're going to do Lynn, and then I might open it up to legal counsel if they wanted to talk about any type of rebidding, or if they want to weigh in on anything related to what we can or cannot do with that. So, Sumya, go ahead.
I think at this point, it doesn't hurt to talk to Civico with our recommendations on parking and finance and see what they say. Give them, a period of a month and see what they come up with. And if they come up with something great, and if they don't, at that point, we can rebid. But I feel like we'll have better negotiating power with Civico since they invested so much time and money into it already. So we'll have a better opportunity to negotiate with Civico as opposed to new developers.
Thanks. Lynn Sweet from LDS Consulting has her hand up. Please go ahead, Lynn.
Hi, sorry, I'm driving. I just wanted to put out there that I'm not sure where you're thinking the parking and the money is going to come from a developer, and that you're putting this back out on the open market with the constraints that are currently in place on the site. And I think we've talked about this a few times, which is the concerns around the Chamber of Commerce building, the parking, the retail, the affordable component. I'm just not sure where you think the money's going to come from. You have an appraisal that's $3.6 million that assumes an empty parking lot and a 40B project with no parking for the town. So I really do want, we went through a lot of financials, and, we looked at a lot of different models. The site is a very small, tight site in a downtown area where retail is appropriate. They have put a layer of parking into the town. Every development project can only withstand so many variables. So I just wanted to remind people in this discussion of that.
I have a comment to that, if you don't mind.
Please.
I don't know, last time you were downtown Winchester, Lino, but unfortunately we have empty shops right now. People are going out of business and moving shops other places. So the extra retail, I think that the demand isn't there for it. And
but
yeah,
this,
we looked at numbers.
This project is bringing people to the downtown. That's the whole idea of housing, is that it revitalizes, it brings life into a downtown. That's what having people live in apartments does.
Not if they bring those residents, but we'll lose triple lived here for. And as far as where we're going to find this money or get more money or get a better deal, by reopening it with.
Paul, unfortunately, we're hearing kind of every other word there. I don't know if anyone else got that, but okay, sorry. So sorry, Paul. We didn't get that. I don't know if you can hear us. Okay, we're gonna go with dead zone. We're gonna go with dead zone there for Paul. Unfortunately, we'll take a quick minute for Paul to maybe get out of that dead zone.
Can we look at bills? I mean, we put it up there, and Bill, I just reading it on my phone. I mean, there's some interesting, and some of it overlaps.
Maybe it's just a bad spot for the project, but let the market tell us that. Thank you. I might be.
Okay. So Pat was requesting that we put up Bill's recommendation. Again, we still don't have a vote on how to deal with the findings. We have a general idea that yes, okay, 5 different reports will be okay, but no decision has been made. I would love to go on to the recommendations if a decision has been made on the findings. So I'm not trying to truncate things here, but we're just not we're focusing really on the recommendations, and we haven't even made a decision yet.
So
We still
Brian,
have plenty of time.
Yeah, so I think instead of like focusing, whether we're talking about specifically findings or recommendations, maybe we could get a sense of the task force just in terms of the form of the report that they want to submit.
Please,
instead of
yeah.
like talking specifically about findings or recommendations. So is the sense, and I don't know if you all want to take a vote on this, that your preference is to submit 5 individual reports with a cover letter summarizing either your priorities and or the outcome of some votes that you want to take specific to recommendations.
So I'll make that motion, Beth, to keep this thing moving and make Brian happy. I think we're there anyway, so, but I'll make the motion if someone wants to second it.
I'll second that. Can you hear me?
Yep, we got Paul as a second. So the motion is to submit 5 different reports with under one cover. And under that cover, there will be all of the rankings with everyone's points conglomerated. So each category has a total number of points, and then everything else is simply individual, completely unedited individual reports, essentially as attachments.
And then I think it's up to the task force whether there's some overarching recommendations that you want to take a vote on that you would include in that cover letter.
Yeah, so that there's a first and a second. Is there any discussion about this motion? Stephanie, do you have discussion about this motion?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I had 2 questions. One is if we, in that cover letter, could we put, instead of just like a cumulative points, could our cover letter break down how each of us ranked individually, since we're doing 5 separate covers?
Yeah. So an edit to the motion to not just have a conglomerated points scale system, to have 5 members with all of their rankings and points, as well as a conglomerated point scale. Okay, so correct. Yep.
Okay, and then second question, on the reports themselves, I'm only aware of, so my general point in question was where we're referencing studies or documents that aren't public, can we attach them? I have one in mind, Pat, which is you referenced the Chamber's recent survey on parking, and I would love it if we could, particularly as that's more on like the finding side, if we could attach the results of that survey or something with a little more detail.
So yeah, I think whoever may or may not be writing that cover will have a list of attachments, and we can put whatever. So it'll be in that first page in the cover. We'll show all the things that are attached. We can certainly put those results in at the end of the report.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, so I think we could include the parking survey results, all of Lynn's memos, and then anything that we want to include, maybe some of those Q&As that we did from the previous meeting. We can attach that sort of slide deck to the report as well. That's the pleasure of the task force.
All right, so we have a first and a second. Is there any more discussion on how the report structure will be handled?
I do. This is Paul. Could you
Yeah.
clarify the last part, Beth? You're talking about including in this finding all the Q&A work that we did?
Yeah, so I'm just thinking, the goal of this report is to summarize all the information you've collected, which has been a lot over the past, month and a half, as well as your findings and individual findings and recommendations at this point. So we could include, as Stephanie requested, the parking survey that Pat was able to provide from the chamber. We could include all of Lynn's memos, and we can include like a printout of the slide deck we went through at the last few meetings with all the Q&As as an attachment to the report, just as for information purposes.
So I think that makes sense because really the select board can look at the final results, meaning everybody's individual reports and the cover sheet with the attachments that kind of reminds me of 5th grade math where they say, show your work. So
Right.
they can see the process that we went through, but then they hopefully will put heavy good with that. Thank you.
Okay, I guess, so again, first, a second, and there has been discussion. I'm gonna take a vote and I'll just go around here. Bill Cummings, you have a question?
I have a question. I have a question, Brian, and first of all, thank you, Patty, for getting that memo so other members could read it. I think it'd be a very good idea to do just what's been suggested. And I'd only add that somebody determine and put a maximum length or recommended length on the individual reports. Some of us could get carried away and send an awful lot of material, which is probably inappropriate, but to summarize it down to a single sheet, something of that nature. So their reports are not voluminous, being a burden on the people putting them together, but more importantly, the people who have to read them.
You're talking about the actual task force reports, the each members. I mean, because we have all of those at the moment.
Well, if I think with some of them came in as draft copies, but that they not be greatly increased in length, or that they be that you determine what length they should be, or make a recommendation.
I would not, personally, I would not give a recommendation for length.
Yeah, I would agree. I think folks can summarize the findings and recommendations that they feel are appropriate based on their experience on the task force. I agree, Bill. It shouldn't be like a 20-page document, since we'll have a lot of the backup to that as an attachment already. So, you know, I think people can use their discretion in terms of what they feel are as an appropriate length.
Thank you.
So what that means is that everyone will be submitting, whether it's the same report that they've already submitted or changes, but it's going, well, I guess we actually haven't taken the vote yet. So, sorry. So Bill Cummings, are you okay? How do you vote on the report structure that has been laid out before us just now?
In favor.
Patrick Fortin.
Yes. Aye.
Yes. Paul Manganaro.
Yes.
Sumya Ganapathy.
Yes.
Stephanie Zaremba.
Yes.
Okay, so we have the notes in terms of how that's going to be detailed. I think we got to talk a little bit, I guess, about timeline, and then a little bit.
Before we move on.
Yes.
Major accomplishment. 5-0. See, there we go. I'm just joking.
We'll take it. No,
we agree to disagree.
So I think now I think it goes more towards two things. One, if we're, I think it has to do with that cover letter in terms of, are we going to try to come up with some type of agreement on recommendations of some kind? I don't think voting through 52 recommendations is really the best way to go about it. But the document that we had sent the other day was for everyone to kind of at least think about it. This is, you know, we have some time here, at least in terms of brainstorming of how we want to deal with 52 recommendations, and it could just be the same, you know, just the same as everyone does their own report, and the select board looks at that. Or on this cover page, we can talk about some agreements. So it's a question of what do we want to do with any of these recommendations, if we want to come together and either vote or talk about agreed upon recommendations.
So I'm going to make my third shot. I mean, if anyone's read Bill's, I mean, I think Bill's in a lot of ways does more for affordable housing than what the proposal is now, and does address parking and does address revenue. Has everyone read it? I mean, Bill, I don't know if you want to present it, but it does seem sort of like a merging of everything together, and has a developer's brain looking at it with a different angle.
Happy to answer any questions or elaborate on any part of it, certainly.
So maybe I can just, if we can put it up again, and we can go through this recommendation and see if we want to include this on the cover. I guess that's where we're going here. So I'll just read this kind of quickly. So increasing the number of affordable and market rate units in a new bid would change the mix of affordable units and require a new RFP. This is Bill Cummings talking. I strongly believe that reopening the bidding process and making real changes to improve the value of this highly attractive and consequential development is the way to ensure the approval of the Waterfield development. And here's the real recommendation here. Changing the 3-bedroom units and a few of the 2-bedroom units to studios can accommodate the creation of at least 6 more affordable units and at a still more attractive and affordable rate. So please pass this revised proposal on to concerned parties. The elimination of all totally unneeded commercial rental space. So this is really another recommendation, is to eliminate commercial space. So one is to increase the number of 3-bedroom, changing the 3-bedroom units to studios. So decreasing the bedroom count, essentially, increasing number of units, and then taking out commercial rental space that could allow for more additional units as well. Bill, does that summarizes it pretty well? Did you want to add anything there?
Well, it's not a question of adding anything to what's there, but the other item there, in addition to removing all commercial rental space for the benefit of the existing stores already in the neighborhood, another unit there is removing any attempt to save the Chamber of Commerce space and adding that to the living space. And the third significant item there really is the unsaid part of it is you're likely in that process to make it less friendly for family use, but that is not the most ideal location for young children to be running around. And there are no provisions whatever for play yards. So that, I imagine, is why the 3-bedroom units are there in the first place. But eliminating those and getting 6 more affordable units is going to handle 6 more needs, broader needs. And certainly we have a lot of people who retire in Winchester and find that they can't afford to stay there any longer. But that certainly provides opportunities for those folks. And the idea of changing the height of the building to get more market rate units as well will give you some very substantial dollars from the projected rental rates acquired from the additional market rate units. So those things together increase both the affordable and the market rate units, along with a change in the height. That building, as attractive as it is very much behind everything else. And the likelihood of it would be, I think the town right now is talking about, the possibility of another tall building opposite the fire station, the old laundry building next in place of that. For instance, and some of the other buildings up on the hill that are quite prominent, excuse me, are very conspicuous in town. But adding another floor, adding in the location where Waterfield is located, would create more units that are, first of all, would be the most desirable. People living in them would pay a higher rate to be on the top floor, and because of the ambiance of being there. And that's where you get your money for, excuse me, money to put toward parking. And otherwise, there's no way for the developer to pay for more parking. So those are the principal points there, certainly, yes.
Thanks. I'm going to give it to Lynn and then Marty, and then go to the rest of the task force. I will say the one quick thing is that there's a requirement for 3-bedroom units in these types of projects.
Okay.
So, well, I'm gonna that's Lynn. Why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. Sure, and that was there was just 2 points that I want to make. Depending on the permitting route, if the permitting route for this project is 40B, there is a 10% requirement for 3-bedroom units, and with the tax credit program, there's also a requirement. I think that, you know, that I forget whether it's 70 or 80% of the units, majority of the units need to be 2 or more bedrooms, because it is a program that is targeted towards families. And I think, you know, my perception of the fact that it's close to the park in the downtown does make it, you know, family friendly. And the other thing is that by increasing the unit count, you're also increasing parking demand. I think they're all, you know, valid suggestions and something that, you know, I'm sure Civico would be happy to look at. I'm just not sure it's going to have the intended result.
All right, Beth, and then thanks for that, Beth, and then Marty.
Yeah, so I was thinking that because I think there's a lot of information in this one motion that, or potential motion that Bill has here. And so I was thinking that maybe for the next meeting, it would be helpful if Brian and I break these out into individual pieces that the task force could vote on. Like if there was a motion on whether or not the task force wanted to reissue the RFP, so we could break that out. And then if the RFP was to be reissued, there could be motions about the items that you wanted to see included in the evaluation criteria. And then similarly, if the board is going to move forward with negotiation of the LGA with Civico, what are the motions about what the key items you want to have you know, included in that discussion? And maybe we could just put all of those items on the table for the task force to vote on instead of trying to come up with one big recommendation. I'm not sure how folks feel about that, but happy.
That'd be fine. That'd be fine.
I think it's very smart, and I think it's worth looking at. Thank you.
Marty.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back and comment on Bill's suggestions, which are exactly the kinds of things that developers balance and trade off all the time. And I agree that these kinds of things are things that in a conversation with Civico, the town could raise as being open to, as Civico tries to analyze the way to obviously increase revenue and increase parking, because those are two things that people have talked about. I would just be careful if these became recommendations to have them kind of be suggestions, not mandates, because, you know, the specifics of how a building lays out, you may end up with studios that you need to have to make the best use of the space, or you may not be able to do exactly this. So I would just make them, you know, examples of the kinds of things that would make sense to be considered in the renegotiation. And frankly, as the design and the development proceeds, as we all know, this is conceptual design right now. There's more due diligence that has to be done before some of the very, very specifics of the building can be worked out. And those happen naturally after you get a land disposition agreement. So they would happen as part of the ongoing process.
Thanks. Somebody, Stephanie, Sumya, and then Pat.
Kind of along the lines of what Marty was just saying, I don't necessarily agree with the intricate specifics, Bill, of what you're saying, though I agree with the spirit. And going back to the thought of what could be in our cover letter, I would be completely in support of statements in a cover letter saying things like, we recommend that the select board evaluate whether we need commercial rental space and be open to removing that in favor of better parking or better, more living space. We recommend that they consider removing the chamber building, which we think could be used for parking or additional spaces. We think the select board, although I know a lot of people struggle with the height of the building, I would be supportive of saying the select board should consider adding another floor to the building to look at whether more affordable or market rates are needed, because one of the things we found is that it's not necessarily one-to-one of like more market rate equals more income because of all the intricacies of the tax credits and the subsidies. So I would love, if we're breaking these down to kind of vote one by one, I would love to see them just taken up a little bit one level of specificity so that we're not making really firm recommendations, but that we are saying specific areas, bedroom count, bedroom type, commercial space, chamber space, as things we really want the select board to look at.
Okay, so it makes sense. You're talking about essentially voting on whether the select board should take these things into consideration during the renegotiation. Essentially what you're saying. So Sumya and then Pat.
Yeah, I just had a question comment. I don't know if I'm misremembering, but from about 2 to 3 meetings ago, we were looking at the rents from the studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 and 3 bedrooms, and it seemed like the studio rent was a lot less compared to the 1 and 2 bedrooms. So I believe it was you, Pat, who had suggested changing the studios to 1 bedrooms. So I'm just curious if we're also looking at finance to the town, if we need to kind of take that into consideration. I do think it makes sense to suggest to the select board to remove the chamber building if it's structurally possible, and if we can get more parking, and then also suggest considering to remove some of the retail for parking or more units as well.
Thanks, Sumya. Pat?
See, I think what Bill has done is probably what I've been trying to do for a month and a half, but he obviously did a much better job. These are all showing examples of how this RFP was flawed. And I do agree that we can't get too specific, although the selectmen can adjust whatever we do and deal with it. But I think these are all perfect examples of why this thing should be rebid in an open market with as many developers as want, giving them room. I think even on the retail space, maybe the option is they have the choice if it's residential or retail. With the revenue, with Paul's proposal as revenue and parking as high priorities, now I'm a developer and I'm going to figure out how to make money so that I can build parking. And if I want to make those units retail because they're worth more money, then I will. If not, I'll make them residential. I think they're probably worth more as residential. The retail rates are awful. So what this has done is this has cleared the deck a little bit to give people opportunity. And I think that's one of the core problems with this RFP. And it's probably a legal question, but I think we're well past the line where you can't even negotiate with Civico anymore if this is where we're going, because you're really creating a whole new proposal with a whole new vision. And it just blows up the RFP.
Beth, your hand is raised, sorry.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, just thinking through how we can structure this, right? Because I think it's unlikely the task force is going to come to one consensus opinion on whether or not the RFP should be reissued or we can negotiate with Civico. In either case, it feels like there's a lot of consensus points about the ideas that should be considered, right? So some of us feel like you have to reissue the RFP to be able to reconsider those points, and some of us feel like you might be able to continue to negotiate with LDA, with Civico. So I think in terms of how we structure this, there should probably be one vote that talks about whether or not you want to make the recommendation to the board to reissue the RFP. And then there should be a series of votes about the specific things that whether or not you renegotiate the LDA or you reissue the RFP, these are the things that should be considered, right? So the select board's got to get over that first step of considering whether they want to reissue the RFP or make that negotiation with Civico. You're going to give a recommendation vote based on your vote. And then either way that they go, there's at least a list of things that this task force recommends that they consider in either direction that you go. Does that seem like a reasonable path forward?
I think it does. I think it's going to be narrowed a little bit more. The idea is that what are we actually going to be voting on? So like I said, I don't see us voting on 52 recommendations, which are the current. So the question, so like Beth said, maybe the idea is that leading up to our Monday meeting, everyone emails Patty Mahalich.
So here's what I was actually thinking, Brian. What if, and I'm not trying to take this over from the task force, so please tell me if you feel like this is not a direction you want to go in, but I was thinking of Brian and I put together a draft cover letter summarizing kind of the points that we've heard. It would come from the task force, but at least it would help you guys get a start in drafting a cover letter. And then we put together a series of recommended motions that you can talk through at your next meeting and decide whether to vote on. And we would send that out to everybody prior to the meeting on Tuesday. And the motions would be about, whether or not to reissue the RFP, and then these specific, revenue to the town, parking, bedroom count type, chamber space, retail space, those types of things would be the motions that we would be asked, the task force could vote on to make overreaching recommendations.
I think that's a very good idea. For time's sake and done properly, and it still gives the authority to keeps the authority within the task force to approve it or not. So I'd appreciate that work, and I think it would be helpful to everybody.
Who's going to catch us, John Paul? Who's going to catch up John Paul, Beale Street?
Pat, your hands up.
Yep. Thank you. I mean, I think, Beth, I like that idea generally. I think Paul already sort of made a motion related to his proposal. Bill's is different, but the same. I mean, I'm prepared to vote on the RFP wording. And I think maybe Paul can make a friendly amendment to his RFP, and I would, his motion that we vote I'll make a motion, we vote on to issue a new RFP with the conditions or the recommendations to be determined at the next meeting. So we get that over with, and we realize that we're in camp of a new RFP needs to be created. So I'll put that on the table. And if Paul wants to amend his to accept that, then we can maybe get that piece over with and done with. The next meeting's just dealing with recommendations.
So I think Paul made the motion to reissue it with several different changes. With several different changes to the RFP. So I think it's already been made, Pat, or how would you be amending it?
So Pat, my recommendation is that you break it out into very small pieces, right? That one motion be that you vote whether or not to reissue the RFP, right? And then there'd be multiple other motions about what tweaks would be included either in that RFP, or if the select board decided to go forward with a renegotiation of the LDA.
Yeah, and
as opposed to trying to make one big overarching, because
right.
I think there's pieces of bills that people like, there's pieces of Paul's that people might like, and then there's some folks who aren't gonna are opposed to voting on an RFP altogether. So I'm trying to make sure that we include those people's opinions, either direction that the board goes, RFP or renegotiation of the LDA.
Yeah, no, and I think I'm trying to say exactly what you're saying, Beth. I think what the recommendations are complicated, and there's a lot of options, and we're not going to get to 50, but we can, once we know our priorities, I think we can get to recommendations. I guess what I was saying to Paul is, do you want to withdraw your motion? I'll make it cleaner, Brian. Paul, do you want to withdraw your motion and repose it as just a simple, the task force agrees we need to reissue the RFP with recommendations to be determined at the next meeting? If you want to do that, I'd second it, and we get the RFP piece.
If I understand everybody correctly, I think it does. I think I would consider it because it does meet the concerns that Brian had too about doing the findings and everything else first. And so I would recommend my motion to say, take a vote on who's in favor to reissue to recommend reissuing the RFP. With the data from that we will discuss at our next meeting, and findings from our next meeting and recommendations from our next meeting. So I would like to make that motion where I redefine it for breaking it up in pieces. Where this first piece today would be to like to move that we recommend to the select board that the RFP be reopened.
All right. So there's a motion on the floor.
So I'll second it.
Yep, sure. Yeah, there's a motion on the floor to reissue the RFP as a standalone motion, seconded by Pat Fortin. Is there a discussion? Lynn, do you have anything related to this discussion, or is this about something else?
Not to the specific motion. It's about the Chamber of Commerce building. So if you want to come back to me on that.
We'll have to come back. We'll have to come back to that. So further on the motion, Stephanie.
I'm concerned that this motion is out of order, so to speak, meaning that my understanding is that there are considerations of legal liability on both sides, reissuing or not reissuing. I would love it. It looks like Jill is on. Mina is, I am extremely concerned about the task force making a recommendation that effectively tells, I mean, the select board doesn't have to listen to us, but it then becomes a thing on the record. And they should be weighing this, I think, primarily from a legal risk to the town perspective. For us to recommend something that could land the town in a costly lawsuit feels very concerning to me. And I would like to understand what I think I've heard on those legal considerations a little bit more.
I'm not a lawyer, Stephanie. What are the legal concerns if the RFP is reissued?
Well,
so that's where I was hoping Jill could weigh in.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we'll let legal counsel kind of explain the question, or explain the answer, which is what are we beholden to at the moment? What are we what would happen if under what conditions can we reissue the RFP? I guess is the short question from Stephanie. Jillian Barger of Anderson Krieger.
Hey everyone. So apologies that Mina did have to hop off, and I think he probably has a little more expertise in this area than I do. My focus is more real estate and municipal real estate, and his is more municipal in general. But my understanding is that there isn't necessarily an issue with reissuing the RFP if we are in fact issuing something that is substantially different with different evaluation criteria and whatnot. The RFPs that we have issued to date and the agreements that we did enter into were all contingent on receipt of the necessary municipal approvals, which of course we don't have. So as of now, the deal where it stands is dead, and we would have the authority to go ahead and reissue a new process under the normal procurement laws. I want to make sure part of this conversation is taking into account that we did issue initially an RFQ to pre-qualify some specific bidders, and then to those particular people we issued the RFP. So when we're talking about reissuing the RFP, I just want to make sure that we have clarity of whether we're going to be which stage we would be restarting at the initial RFQ to pre-select a new pool of developers, or if we would just be going back to the RFP stage and issuing to those pre-selected developers a new RFP.
Thanks for that distinction.
Sorry, Jillian. Just a quick follow-up on that. So I wrote down a note from a previous meeting when we were talking about the ground lease length, where Mina said going back to the RFP because they were the awarded bidder expose us to a lawsuit from Civico. Is that not true?
I'm not sure I was on for that meeting, so I don't fully know what issue he was responding to. I'm happy to have him follow up with the group on that point. I know that there's obviously a difference between the question of do we have to, have we changed so much that we have to reissue a new RFP versus what is our liability if we just decide to go ahead and issue a new RFP, excuse me. I do agree with the comment that maybe this is a bit premature and the priority might be better served in identifying this group's priorities that we should be seeking from the developer, and then to leave it to the select board, or for this group to make a decision of whether or not that new group of criteria then would require reissuing an RFP versus negotiating with the developer that we've already selected.
So I'd suggest that the task force hold off on voting on this motion regarding reissuing the RFP. I'm not sure, is Mina able to join us on Tuesday, I think is the next meeting?
I believe he is.
Okay, so I would suggest that we hold off on taking the vote. The motion can still stand, but hold off on a vote until we get Mina's formal opinion on that.
Thank you. I would really appreciate that, Beth. It makes a big difference in how I feel about it.
Yep.
Thanks for
I think that's fair and reasonable. The motion stands, but we hold off until we table till the next meeting, and we work it all together with the recommendations, and then see where they lead us.
Okay, so this looks like discussion's still open about that motion. Sumya, you're next, and we got about 10 minutes left. There was a couple of administrative stuff I wanted to get to too.
You know, we might ultimately have to rebid and put out another RFP, but my question is, what's wrong with just going back to Civico with these recommendations that Bill has made, and we seem to have some kind of agreement on, and see if they can kind of work with that? I'd also be curious in terms of any type of legal liability, but I was just wondering, can we just see what Civico says, and if they can't do it, then yeah, rebid.
So I think that is basically going to come out of the votes of the recommendations. So very quickly, I think what I'm hearing is that there's two options here. That it's either Beth and I kind of glean all the recommendations and we put them up for people to vote, or each task member gives us the actual motions that we would all be voting on. Meaning, are we just going to vote on all 52, or are we getting some type of a subset?
My recommendation is that everybody provides their detailed recommendations, right? But that we have maybe 5 to 7 overarching recommendations that this group
agrees
votes on.
Well, that's the question. Agrees, or just votes? I mean, and how do we decide?
So again, I think to me it's voting, right? And we'll show that some of these maybe have a 5-0 vote. Whether I think you're probably not going to get a 5-0 vote on whether the recommendation is to reissue the RFP, but you'll probably have a 5-0 vote on recommending that the select board, whether they reissue the RFP or they reopen negotiations with Civico, look at the parking piece in greater detail, right? So there, and we can I think craft those motions if folks are comfortable with us taking a first stab at that in a way that leaves it open in terms of which direction the board goes. Obviously, there'll be a vote on the RFP versus renegotiation. That's a decision ultimately for the select board to make, and in either direction that they go, I think it would be helpful for them to have recommendations from you in terms of what you see as priorities. So I think there's a series to me of maybe five or 6 motions on some of these key issues we've talked about.
Okay, so then
excuse me, I'm a little confused. I thought we had already agreed that like Beth and Brian would take the information that they have from us, put together a recommendation for the next meeting, kind of a format that we could review and move on in different smaller segments and either approve or not approve. So now you want to, are we saying you want us to supply our recommendation?
Yes. Sorry, Paul. I was trying to determine, are we just going to put all 52 of these recommendations in there, voting on 52, or are Beth and I going to be kind of putting some of them together and putting some type of a motion package before the group that's maybe a subset of those 52, something like 10 to 15, or I don't know. Is that
again, everybody's report is still going to get attached with all. This is my recommendation, right? So take it or leave it for whatever it's worth, but everybody's report is going to get attached with your individual recommendations. So none of that's going to change. But we pull out some of these key things we've talked about today from Paul, your motion, and from Bill, your letter here, some of the things that Stephanie just went through about chamber space, bedroom count, retail space. And we make a few motions, like I said, probably 5 to 7 motions around those issues that you can vote on in terms of your overarching recommendations, right? So that it's almost like an executive summary of votes. Obviously, everybody has very detailed recommendations in the reports that you put together, but this is kind of an executive summary of the key points that you want to get across to the select board in terms of what they're going to consider going forward.
All right. So
thank you. I think that's a very good description, and that's what I was on the assumption. I think that's the best way to go.
All right. Thank you for clarifying that, Beth. So, Pat, do you or anyone else have questions on how we're going to go about this?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say exactly what you said, Beth. You guys know the big 3. It's really related to parking, revenue, and affordability, and there's a handful of smaller pieces in there. I think it's good advice not to be really myopic on those things, but more focusing on, and adding a floor to adding more market rate units, to me, is one of them. The other one is, maybe looking at the mix and giving the selectman or the developer the option to change mixes or whatever. You can probably globally, and we can always tweak them. I think that's great if you do that. Just quickly to one of the earlier questions. My concern with the RFP is dealing with Civico still, to me, just has I don't know why we wouldn't go to market with so many changes, whether we can or can't legally. I mean, the selectmen are going to do what they have to do legally. I don't know that we have to make recommendations on what we believe. I think the only way you really get a full view of the market is to reissue this RFP. Even if Civico hit everything we want, could we have gotten twice the money or twice the parking or twice the units out of the market? We're never going to know until you go to the market. So that's kind of my view on the RFP, not to screw up Civico, but to make sure that we can say to everybody, you know, we changed the deal and everybody had a shot at it.
Yeah, so I mean, I think my sense is this task force is not going to come to a consensus on a recommendation about the RFP. So we should take a vote on that after you hear Nina's legal, recommendation there, and then we can summarize both the majority and the minority opinions in the cover letter that goes to the select board.
I think that sounds like totally reasonable. Bill, your hand is up. You're muted, Bill.
You got to unmute, Bill.
Bill, you're muted, Bill.
You're on mute, Bill.
There we go.
Hey.
It's hard to say something with no mic. My hand was up simply to comment further on Sumya's observations about possible legal challenges. And I agree with her, the essence of what she's saying, but you do still have a motion on the table to recommend that we go forward with a new RFP. And that could be simply supplemented by subject to the endorsement of town council. We recommend that happen. And that would be the fact anyway, but it recognizes that we're doing it in full knowledge that there could be a concern.
My bill was that my vote might change based on what Nina says, and that's why I thought it made sense to defer. I don't feel like I can vote on that right now.
Yeah, I don't think there's any rush to take that vote today. We can table that till Tuesday when we have Nina.
Right.
Right, that was my understanding. We'll
Yep.
vote on proceed with the followings on Tuesday.
Yep. So I think where we are right now is kind of trying to recap what Beth and I have to do. So Beth and I will conglomerate some type, like we said, some 5 to 10 motions that kind of capture a lot of the major points that we've talked about today and that are in your report, so that we can have a vote on somewhere in this 5 to 10 recommendation point that would be on the cover letter. The rest of the report is going to simply be attaching everyone's individual report behind it. That's another decision that we made today. I think the only other admin stuff that we need is that we don't have all of the priority lists from all 5 members at the moment. So that is something that we do need,
Yeah, because that will be in the cover letter.
That's
So
definitely going to be in the cover letter. So the 2 members who haven't yet, please do that. And I think that's all we need from members at the moment. I don't think there's any homework tonight this weekend that's specific for the Tuesday meeting, other than reading materials. But really, it's getting those 2 spreadsheets. So thank you for those. Like I said, 3 members have already sent. The other 2, we do need those numbers so that we can put it into a cover letter, so that we can get that out Monday. Beth, is that the hope? Is that we'll get that letter out?
That's the best we can do, folks.
Yeah. It is a holiday. But we will get that sometime, I'm guessing Monday afternoon or before, and we'll go from there. So we got through all of our agenda items. It's 10:28. Are there any other questions, either for staff or anybody else, just in general? Any questions right now for anybody?
No, I just want to thank everybody, and unfortunately I have to jump off now, but thank you for getting me from Cincinnati, Ohio to Lexington, Kentucky. I completed the ride, but I wish everybody a good weekend, and appreciate everybody's work. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Paul. We appreciate everyone's time here. Lynn has a final thought. You're muted, or maybe you didn't mean to have your hand up. Okay.
Well, sorry about that.
There you go. Hey.
Was driving now on my computer. With regard to the Chamber of Commerce building, I'm hearing what your goals are for next steps. And if one of the goals is to re-examine whether or not the Chamber of Commerce building can be used as part of the development or raised, then I think that any developer is going to want to have some type of, either engineering or title exam or something done to fully understand the implications of the building. Because I think there's a lot of unknown to date. And I think that every developer is going to want answers to that. So I would, one of your recommendations that you might consider is that before you either reopen discussions with Civico or take another step, that some resources be dedicated to understanding whether or not there is the viability of utilizing that space in a different way.
Thanks. Thanks for that. I think Beth and I can incorporate that into a potential vote that people could choose to vote on or not. So thanks for that info. I think we should call it a week. It's 10:30. We have another 90-minute meeting on Tuesday with the idea of essentially voting on somewhere between 5 and 10 motions, and then that'll be that.
Good. Good job. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. So one more meeting. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the holiday and some fall time, and we will see you on Tuesday. Right.
Thanks.
Have a good one, everybody.